The National Desk, America's News Now.
Dozens are dead in Hawaii as devastating fires ravage thousands of acres and tourists rush to escape the islands.
Anyone who's lost a loved one whose home has been damaged or destroyed is going to get help immediately.
Costs are climbing as tens of thousands of people seek refuge in New York City. The mayor now asking for federal help.
My number one obligation is to the people of the city of New York.
The family of a man shot and killed by FBI agents is speaking out for the first time. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. We're happy you're here with us. At least 36 people are dead from wildfires burning through parts of Hawaii, the worst of it in Maui. 6 fires are still active, and search and rescue teams are now looking for survivors. Hundreds of buildings and much of the historic town of Lahaina have been destroyed. Over roughly 2,000 acres. Mass evacuations continue in Maui. Look at these images where almost 11,000 people were still without power today. President Biden has approved Hawaii's disaster proclamation declaration, opening up federal funding. More than 100 National Guardsmen have been sent there to help. There's been a frenzy to get as many people, mainly tourists, off the island as fast as possible. Hawaiian Airlines is offering $19 flights for urgent travel from Maui to Honolulu. Samuel Webb lives in Maui, but is going to college in Minnesota. He is in disbelief.
Surreal, because that place existed my whole life. I grew up there. I grew up going there, and I would not expect it to just burn down in one night.
Just terrible. The flames have been fanned by strong winds from Hurricane Dora. The wind is forecast to die down tonight and into tomorrow. Former President Donald Trump is preparing for his next court case after pleading not guilty to new charges in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. Walt Nauta, Trump's aide, pleaded not guilty as well. Their next hearing is on August 25th. Meantime, Mar-a-Lago property manager Carlos de Oliveira did not have local counsel. He's set to return to register his plea on Tuesday, the 15th. Prosecutors in the Office of Special Counsel Jack Smith want to set the trial date in the 2020 election interference case against Donald Trump for January 2nd, 2024. The government says they expect the case to last 4 to 6 weeks. Donald Trump's lawyers have yet to respond to the request. Ultimately, the decision will be made by Judge Tanya Chutkin. Talking about your money now, the number of Americans applying for jobless benefits jumped last week by about 21,000. The Labor Department reported today. New labor data also shows consumer inflation rose slightly in July. 2% annual inflation is considered normal. The current rate now sits at 3.2%. The National Desk, Atra El-Nashar, takes a closer look at the data impacting your budget.
July was the hottest month ever recorded.
Your total is...
And it turns out prices were a bit hotter, too. Consumer inflation last month breaking a year-long streak of decline, which economists expected because it's being compared to an abnormally low reading from last July.
Looking at what's happening right now, this month and this past quarter, inflation has continued to cool.
Some items that are getting cheaper, used cars and trucks, and airfare. More expensive car insurance contributing to a monthly inflation increase of 0.2%. But the biggest contributor, again, is the cost of housing.
Even though there is a robust apartment construction for home purchase, inventory level is simply not there.
National Association of Realtors Chief Economist Lawrence Yoon expects inflation for rent to keep cooling this year as inventory comes on the market.
The latest figure showing only 8% gain. And in the upcoming months, I think it's going to go down to about 5% gain based on some of the trend data that I am looking at.
It's relief that may not feel like it.
Inflation is coming down, but that doesn't mean that the price level is coming down.
ZipRecruiter's Julia Pollack says were it not for the pandemic inflation surge, prices across the board would now be about 7% higher than they were before COVID. Instead, they're more than 17% higher.
That is not going to move away. Prices are going to be permanently higher than they were before the pandemic. They'll grow slowly, but from a much higher base.
Now, that math, of course, is tough on household budgets, but the alternative, Dee, is arguably worse. Deflation, which is when overall prices drop, is typically associated with a dramatic slowdown in the economy, like a recession. And it's what we're starting to see emerge in China. It's harder and takes longer to reverse than inflation.
That's right. We're hearing about that more and more, Atra. This report actually looks at those national trends, but we know inflation isn't the same everywhere. It hits families differently. Which areas of the country are seeing worse inflation than others?
Right. So Wallet Hub analyzes inflation data in pretty much every major metropolitan area in the United States. And they found that the areas with the highest local inflation rate were Miami, Tampa, Denver, Detroit, Atlanta, and Seattle. And the places with the lowest inflation rates were Honolulu, here in Washington, D.C., Houston, Minneapolis, and Anchorage.
Interesting. Atra Elnishar reporting tonight from the Capitol. Thank you. The family of Craig Robertson, the Utah man killed by FBI agents yesterday, issued a statement today saying in part they are shocked and devastated by the senseless and tragic killing of our beloved father and brother, and we fervently mourn the loss of a good and decent man. They went on to say they hold no personal animosity towards those individuals who took part in the ill-fated events, and they ask that the media and public respect our family members' privacy as they come to terms with what happened. This comes as President Joe Biden was in Utah today, his last day of a trip to the West. Republican Governor Spencer Cox welcomed him to Salt Lake City, where he celebrated the one-year anniversary of the PACT Act, which helps veterans exposed to toxic burn pits. Biden also made a fundraising stop in Park City. All 16 Republicans charged in a fake elector scheme in Michigan are challenging the accusations. The final 9 appeared virtually in court today to plead not guilty. 7 had already done so. Prosecutors claim these people signed a document falsely stating they were duly elected and qualified electors. Many of the defendants openly called the investigation politically motivated. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis is telling her staff not to respond to a recent attack ad from former President Donald Trump. Willis didn't say which ad it was, but said it contained derogatory and false information. She wrote in a memo, "We have no personal feelings against those we investigate or prosecute, and we should not express any. This is business. It will never be personal." Willis is investigating Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. She's expected to bring her case before the grand jury next week. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is asking for more money from the federal government to help pay for the city's immigrant issues. There are more than 57,000 migrant and asylum seekers under the city's care. Yesterday, he said the price tag for food, shelter, and medical care was almost $4 billion a year. Today on CBS, he called what is happening in New York City a national problem.
All of the bordering states have now took the funnel right to New York City. New York City is the economic engine of this entire state and country. If you decimate this city, you're going to decimate the foundation of what's happening. Look at Chicago, Los Angeles, Houston, and now you're hearing the governor of Massachusetts.
And almost all hospitals are feeling the impact of drug shortages, according to an American Society of Health System pharmacist study out today. Nearly a third, look right here, have had to skip or delay treatment for patients, calling the situation critical. Drug shortages include chemotherapies, steroids, oral antibiotics, and pain medications, among others. Limits on the Biden administration's contact with social media companies were considered by a federal appeals court today. Judges heard arguments to decide whether to lift the limits, which stem from a ruling by a Louisiana judge who found the government pushed social media companies to censor conservative views during the pandemic. White House officials say they were trying to curb disinformation. NFL Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre is still a defendant in a civil lawsuit over misspent welfare money. A panel of 3 justices on the Mississippi Supreme Court denied Favre's appeal to be removed from the case today. In all, more than 36 people and businesses have been sued for improperly spending nearly $7 million between 2016 and 2019. The Writers Guild of America and the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers will be back at the negotiating table tomorrow, possibly to discuss proposals. The 2 sides met last week, but only to address the resuming of talks. Hollywood writers have been on strike since May. The Screen Actors Guild remains on strike with no news of any meetings with the studios in the near future. Because of that, the 75th Emmy Award show has tentatively been rescheduled for January 15th of next year. It was postponed from its original date of September 18th. Because of the actors' strike, no host has been announced for the event. Joe Manchin says he has been contemplating becoming an independent. The West Virginia Democrat appeared on a West Virginian radio show today to explain his thoughts, saying, "I'm thinking seriously what's best for me. I have to have peace of mind, basically. I've been thinking about that for quite some time." Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema left the party last year, but still caucuses with the Democrats, along with independent Angus King and Bernie Sanders. Coming up next here on the National Desk, 5 Americans imprisoned in Iran could be coming home. The latest development in a rare deal between the two countries. Then a new study highlighting health risks linked to common medications for heartburn. And later on, how one particular protest changed the public safety landscape 3 years since the murder of George Floyd. Five Americans imprisoned in Iran may finally be coming home. Iranian officials at the UN claim to have an agreement to release these prisoners to house arrest in the first step of a possible exchange between Tehran and Washington. The trade could include freeing roughly $6 billion in Iranian government assets blocked under U.S. sanctions, but U.S. officials did not corroborate details of any deal. Adrian Watson, a spokesperson for the National Security Council, said negotiations for their eventual release remain ongoing and are delicate. We will therefore have little in the way of details to provide about the state of their house arrest or about our efforts to secure their freedom. President Biden wants to send more aid to Ukraine. He asked Congress today for more than $20 billion in assistance. Congress approved the last request back in November, but American support for the war effort has since waned. The White House also requesting $12 billion for federal disaster funds. The battle over who is eligible to compete in women's athletics has become a hot political issue. That's why former NCAA swimmer Riley Gaines is launching a new initiative to further her fight for women's rights in sports. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins joining us from Washington.
At the 2022 NCAA Swimming and Diving National Championships.
What a race this is going to be coming home the last 25.
University of Kentucky's Riley Gaines tied for 5th place with UPenn's Leah Thomas, a 6'4" trans woman.
I feel totally betrayed by the NCAA in this moment. Like, hold on. This is exactly what Title IX was passed to prevent. Yet now you're telling us we have to embrace it, and if we don't, we're the problem?
The experience set Gaines on a path to fight for biological women's rights in athletics. Her latest initiative, launching the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute, a conservative nonprofit located in Arlington, Virginia.
What do you hope this new center achieves?
This is something that I wish I had when I began to speak up, giving them the resources, giving them the training, the mentoring, the guidance to be leaders.
Working with the new center is University of Cincinnati student Olivia Krolchek, who went viral when a professor gave her a failing grade for using the term biological woman.
The fact that I was actually silenced for speaking the truth when speaking the truth is the most important thing right now. That's what really threw me into this.
Gaines successfully advocating for the Save the Women's Sports Act in Texas. The law bans biological males from competing in women's sports at Texas colleges and universities. Texas joining 15 other states with similar bans. The Biden administration proposing changes to Title IX that would make these state bans illegal.
I want to send a message to the entire community, especially to transgender children. You are loved.
Here on Capitol Hill, House Republicans pushing for nationwide federal legislation that would ban transgender students from competing on sports teams different from their biological gender. The White House confirming if such legislation ever lands on Joe Biden's desk, he will veto it. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Kayla, thank you. More research is showing possible negative effects from sugar. The new study in JAMA found a small percentage of women who had at least one sugar-sweetened drink every day had an 85% higher risk of liver cancer and a 68% higher risk of chronic liver disease death. That link was not found with artificially sweetened drinks. The authors said the study doesn't prove anything was caused by the sugary drinks. Long-term use of common heartburn medications may increase the risk of dementia. A new study published in the journal Neurology found that people 45 and older who took proton pump inhibitors for over 4 years had a 33% higher risk of developing dementia than those who never took them. The study authors said more research is still needed. And social media influencer Kai Cenat is speaking out for the very first time since the chaotic New York City giveaway gone wrong. You remember these chaotic scenes you're looking at on your screen right here. He said he's beyond disappointed with the crowd that turned violent last Friday. He said it was supposed to be a safe and fun event and that he would do it the correct way next time. He's been charged with a felony and 2 misdemeanors. All Massachusetts public school students can now get free lunch. Governor Maura Healey made it official when signing the state's budget into law. 26.2% of households in the state are food insecure as of May 2023. That's according to the group Project Bread. Federal and state money will fund the program. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
The assistant superintendent says 2 people camped out here over the last weekend in July, and they were found by the custodial crew. When a custodian returned to work on a Monday morning, she found a ladder that didn't belong to the school. Then she found people that didn't belong living on the roof. The assistant superintendent says police escorted 2 people living in a makeshift campsite off the property. They were not arrested. This happening at a time when residents say the city has a homeless problem.
There are people that cannot sustain themselves in a house or a home or with a job. They have to live on top of a school roof. That's really concerning.
No one should touch you while you are traveling. And if it happens, you can tell us. We want you to tell us.
90 people reported being sexually assaulted on a plane last year. That number is up to 62 so far this year.
And too often, they prey on young people.
The FBI here in Seattle tells me that 1 in 5 sexual assaults in flight are committed against children.
Sexual assault on airplanes is a federal crime.
Cases headed to trial in Western Washington charge men with sexually assaulting 4 teenagers and 1 adult, all while in flight.
We've seen our use of blankets when someone's sleeping and someone else is too close to them.
It was a day to let kids be kids. 60 vendors were in attendance, plus activities ranging from bounce houses to face paintings.
We take the opportunity to give back to the community. The community is kind to us, so we want to give back.
Attendees were able to get an array of free school supplies, free tickets to the pool, paddle boats, and miniature golf. And there was such thing as a free lunch. And many resources were offered as well.
So we have a lot of resources for people, whether they want to go to college or have their understand civil rights or even pick up a free book.
Nearly 4,000 people from all over the valley took advantage of the opportunity. YSS helps more than 6,000 people in need yearly, just in Ohio County.
So what we are able to afford to people who can't afford that is an opportunity to use the park as a family, to share some time, to actually just enjoy the Ohio Valley as a family before going back to school.
Coming up next, lessons learned, the bad and the good that came from the Capitol Hill occupied zone in Seattle 3 years ago. That's coming up in 90 seconds. Three years have passed since the murder of George Floyd and subsequent protests. Cities around the country made changes to public safety as a result. But in this Spotlight on America, correspondent Chris Daniels shows us how one particular protest altered the landscape.
This Seattle sidewalk,
every single day from the get-go,
has been a part of a long path for TK Turner.
I guess in 2020, it all came full circle for me.
She returns to this space now, a changed person.
It wasn't about another black man dying at the hands of the police. It was just the last straw in systematic oppression that I think we were willing to take at that time.
Turner led the original 2020 protest over the murder of George Floyd here to the city's East Police Precinct. Yet as the situation devolved and the crowd control techniques were heavily criticized, police abandoned the area.
I'm too old for this.
A 5-block Capitol Hill occupied zone, or CHOP, formed around it, filled with people who took criminal advantage. TK says the original message was hijacked.
Absolutely, 100%.
There were 2 deaths, multiple shootings, arson, and several alleged sexual assaults.
Is this CHOP or Hooliganville?
It was finally dismantled a month later, and it has left a lasting scar here, a physical reminder for how cities across the country handle a future crisis. Correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you were sleeping there because you were worried about your business.
Correct.
John McDermott had to literally fend for himself a block away from the CHOP.
Our building, was broken into and was lit on fire. The fire department was sitting literally at the corner of the block, but they couldn't come in because the Seattle Police Department wouldn't come in. If you dial 911, what do you expect to have happen? Where are the tax dollars that we're paying to the city?
That is why he and multiple business owners sued Seattle in 2020. The city settled earlier this year for $3.6 million. Spotlight on America has learned it is just part of $12 million in legal fees and payouts related to that moment in time. McDermott moved his car repair business to the suburbs. Mike Solon stayed.
We're still digging out of this hole, this experiment. We're seeing the fruits of that, and that fruit is expired.
He's the Seattle Police Union president and says the episode and fallout should raise alarm bells for departments across America. Solon says by his count, his police guild has lost 600 members in 3 years, and it has increased response times.
You can't recruit anybody, Chris. Who wants to come here? What reasonable human being would want to come to the city of Seattle as a police officer when you deal with this type of political scrutiny? When
and you're saying that as a guild president?
Absolutely. That's the fact. They can't get enough people. We're losing more people than we're gaining.
But all is perhaps not lost.
I realized for me it was more so about the future generations.
At least for TK, who sees the Black Lives Matter mural on her walk to a local college, where she is now finishing her education.
My first thought was always political science and marine biology.
Inspired by what she says are positive public safety changes in Seattle, like the money that was rerouted to community groups and alternative responses, all rooted in that 5-block area that became a national flashpoint. In Seattle, I'm Chris Daniels for Spotlight on America.
Coming up next here on the National Desk, the latest company to send a group of tourists to the edge of space. We're back in 90 seconds. As we come back on air, more Swift. Another re-recorded Taylor Swift album. It's officially coming out, and Swift announced during her last LA Eras Tour show that 1989 Taylor's version will be released on October 27th. Swift has been recording her music, so she owns the rights after talent agent Scooter Braun's company acquired Big Machine label group. Virgin Galactic sent its first group of tourists to the edge of space today. An 80-year-old former Olympian was one of the first people to buy a ticket 18 years ago. It cost $200,000 then. But listen to this. The going rate is $450,000 now. He was joined by a sweepstakes winner and her daughter. Virgin Galactic's rocket ship reaches 55,000 miles up, where passengers can unstrap and float around the cabin for a few minutes. Virgin Galactic plans to start offering monthly rides to space. A lot braver than I am. That's going to do it for us for now. Join us again tonight for the evening edition of the National Desk. Check your local listings. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Have a great night. Thanks for watching.